All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless otherwise stipulated. This meeting will have public comment. For this meeting, the school committee is convening by video conference using Zoom, as posted on the town's website and identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting is being broadcast by HCAM through its many channels, HCAM TV, HCAM YouTube, and I believe Facebook Live. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite board members to provide any comment or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And tonight we will have public comment available as identified in our packet. People were encouraged to submit emails to the school committee by 5 p.m. today for public comment. That brings us to the first item on the agenda. At this time, I would like to invite everybody who is in attendance, if they would like to please join me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand, please. I'm already standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Welcome to everybody who is attending. At this time, I will turn this over to Dr. Kavanaugh for recognitions.
Certainly, thank you. So this evening, we actually have some special guests. We have Arkita and Shrija with us, and also their teacher, Kristen Murphy. These are some quite notable science fair winners. And what we had done was we had asked Jen Smith if she could be with us tonight to really do this recognition and to do it appropriately, because she is, as the subject matter leader in science, she really knows the science fair very well, and she really understands, I think, the incredible esteem worthy of these three folks. So I'm going to hand this over to Jen Smith, and I thank all four of you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. Jen Smith, subject matter leader for science. I just want to start by congratulating our two award recipients and Kristen Murphy and all of the teachers that work with the students in the science fair for their hard work, not only this past year, but in many, many previous years. But this past year, our students, Shrija and Archita, won the Sandofi Genzyme Award, which was for their work on the non-invasive optical biosensor, which allows them to diagnose neonatal anemia. Just the sound of the sound of the project, you can tell these two young ladies are very intelligent and worked very hard on their project. Their first place award actually comes with it a $10,000 cash prize for the students, $5,000 each, but a $10,000 grant for the Hopkinton Science Department, which will be used within the science fair, and an independent study of $5,000 for Mrs. Murphy to continue her research and her education in learning more about the science fair process. So we are very thankful for this award and for the Genzyme Corporation for sponsoring it. And more importantly, we are very proud of our students for all of their hard work, because they are true innovators and thinkers when it comes to the world of science. This award is going to be used in several different ways. One way that we're looking to use the funds is to help all of our students continue with the science fair program this year, particularly in the remote environment. We have to purchase supplies that we may not have had to purchase in the past. So we're definitely going to be utilizing some of the funding for that. We're also looking to purchase some equipment that we can use both in the classroom and as more science fair experiments continue. And third, we're hoping to establish a scholarship for the next several years in honoring the work of these two hardworking young ladies, and to honor their future peers as they work on their science fair project, and to encourage them to seek other forms of education or potentially workshops by giving a prize for our science fair students. I'm not sure if Ms. Murphy wants to add anything else.
Yes, thanks so much. So this is the first place prize at the entire state fair, which is an incredible accomplishment, especially by two underclassmen. And for any of you that know Archita and Shrija, they came to me in September and said, this is what we want to do. And I kind of heard that title and I said, you can't really do that in high school, right? Like, you can't work with blood, and can you really do this? And they said, this is what we want to do. And then they worked so hard throughout every success and challenge and failure. They persevered the entire year. When the fair got canceled with 2 days notice, they pivoted and made a virtual presentation that wowed everyone. And they've spent the past 9 months basically giving a presentation to some of the best and brightest in Massachusetts and across the country, because so many people are so impressed by what they were able to pull off and the incredible work they've done to really change the way we can think about diagnosing this. So we are so, so proud. And I think for every success you see, there were so many days when they worked behind the scenes and really embodied all the things that we try and establish in our students for perseverance and hard work and believing in themselves. And we're so proud to see that recognition. So we're very grateful for this opportunity to say congratulations. And we're very grateful for all of the ways that we'll be able to use this money to continue the great example they've set for other students at Hopkinton. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That is phenomenal. I'm just wondering, Archita, if you could just take a minute and tell us, I'm just so impressed with this whole topic, and the fact that you won is icing on the cake. The fact that you engaged in the scientific inquiry and spend your time trying to solve these kind of problems for me is a real accomplishment. And I'm just curious, what got you involved in this, and what got you involved in this topic? How did you pick it?
So Srija and I both drew from personal experiences in our lives regarding like newborn babies and like how they were invasive, like how the anemia test is invasive, and that newborns are very vulnerable, especially in NICU. They're very vulnerable to such invasive tests. So we were thinking to each other, and like this over the summer, we were like, is there a way to develop a sensor that can make this test non-invasive so that newborns don't have to go through much pain when they're first born? So we were able to discuss amongst ourselves and discuss with Mrs. Murphy, and we were able to basically like apply the content we've learned in school to do this project. So I think like what the school gives us in terms of like content and like the courses, I think that they really helped us do this project and potentially improve the lives of newborns. So yeah.
That's unbelievable. Committee members, anyone want to comment on our esteemed guests?
Congratulations. I'm so impressed. I'm almost weeping. Just fabulous work you guys are doing. Thank you.
So I echo congratulations and just wow. That's amazing work particularly for a high school student. You guys obviously have bright futures ahead of you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I love how you casually throw in, over the summer, we were trying to solve these problems. Over the summer, I think I was drinking lemonade. So really, so impressed. Thank you so much for sharing this. And of course, Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Murphy, you guys are rock stars. And the work that you do with the students who do science fair and then doing it remotely and all the challenges of this particular year, but every year, the dedication you have is we're just grateful for what you've done and what you continue to do with the science department and teaching scientific inquiry. I mean, we're all living through COVID with the vaccine. We've all watched this vaccine life cycle, and it's really brought science to the forefront. It is sort of a positive of the COVID pandemic. We've all been tuned into science and scientific inquiry, and I just love what you guys do. Makes me so excited. Thank you.
Can I also just add how exciting it is to have students and teachers here? It changes just the whole feeling of the meeting for me. So it's wonderful.
Yes, congratulations to the kids and thank you to our faculty. Honestly, I know, Kristen, how many hours you put into that science fair. Like, they are uncountable, seriously.
Well, thank you.
Passion, it really is. So thank you.
Thank you. It definitely takes a village. So we are one of the largest programs in the state, and we couldn't do it without the work of Mr. Bishop making time and resources for us, Ms. Smith's support. The HBTA is our major donor, and so many parents and people in town and companies consult on projects and come judge and offer supplies through Buy Nothing Facebook groups and all sorts of stuff. So thank you to everyone in town who has invested in this program. It means a lot to so many students and makes it really fun to be a part of.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kavanaugh, did you want to move on with more recognitions? I think we have lots of goodness tonight.
So I think that we also have Mr. Hay and some students here tonight to deliver a report.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. I wanted to deliver sort of a snapshot of what's going on, at least at the music department at the high school level. And while we're not able to do concerts this year and do some of the things that we normally do, I figured it'd be best if we had students share their experiences with what we're trying to do this year. So I invited our Tri-M National Honor Society board with some updates and just some snapshots of what's going on in the music department. So we'll open with Madison Luz.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to share with you what the high school has been doing this semester and how the music department has helped us get through the challenges that we've all faced due to COVID-19. Before the onset of the virus, the music department was very busy preparing for our March concerts in Micah. And in some ways that seems very distant now, almost a year later. When COVID hit, we were absolutely devastated. It was a hard blow among all the chaos in the world to realize that we would not be able to perform together again for a long time, and with the seniors, possibly never again. I know that I personally spent a lot of time mourning the loss of community and music. And even today, in talking with my freshman that I tutor, she was saying how hard it is to be a freshman in this environment, especially in music. And I was thinking how much freshman year changed me and gave me some experiences and how difficult that must be. Pre-COVID, the music room was always filled with dedicated performers, vibrant energy, and beautiful music. While the virus may be hindering us from making music together in person, we are still a department of dedicated performers and vibrant energy. Being able to be back in class has even brought me so much joy and comfort in a dark time. Through each other, we've begun healing and working towards the future. I know I am very much looking forward to the day when I get to safely perform again in person with my peers. While we can't say yet with certainty when that will be or what the future will bring, we are pushing forward and making the best out of the space we create for each other and the time we have together. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aiden Medeiros.
So for those of you who don't know, Tri-M is a student-based group that really focuses on spreading and improving the state and level of music, not only in our school, but in our community. So for example, we have put together recordings for people in the community. We've hosted events for music students. We've organized lots of volunteer hours for how we manage concerts and put on performances. And as Maddie just beautifully said, COVID has had a serious impact on the music program this year. During the previous spring semester and the first semester this year, we placed a big emphasis on building community and really getting used to a COVID music experience. So last spring, TRIA members reached out to incoming 8th graders and tried to make connections and ease that kind of transition into high school. And this fall, TRIA members overall have played a pretty active part in connecting with new students. This year alone, we inducted 4 new members into TRIM, and they go by Sheree Ravi, Christina Porzio, Hannah Rurin, and Abigail Baskin. So props to them. And as exhausting and difficult as the coronavirus has been, we are extremely fortunate to have retained a program as allowing and kind of, as expansive as we have at the high school. I know a lot of schools, especially nearby, like they don't have anything. So with the HMA private lesson program has also been able to keep going throughout the entire pandemic. Starting in late March, students were able to do lessons with their teachers through Zoom. And I've even participated in helping out some middle schoolers in kind of these larger group lessons over the last few months. So, of course, lessons all take place on Zoom, and these have been spearheaded by our wonderful music teachers. And like Mr. Hayes said, lower performance opportunities are pretty limited this year. We hope to have a modified Pops concert sometime in May, and that would be probably outdoors on the football field. And that would be one of my last opportunities to play in front of a live audience. So I'm personally very excited and hopeful. So to talk about more about what our music ensembles have been up to, I'm passing on to Olivia.
So for band this year, we were thankfully able to start the school year by playing outside. We played 15 feet apart on one of the football fields, practicing our pep band music that we would normally play at the high school football games. Although the regular football season didn't happen this year, we were able to rehearse our pep band music with all of the concert and symphonic band members together on the football field after school, and even had H-Camera record the whole group playing these pieces. While it may not have been what pep band season normally looks like, it was an amazing feeling to finally be back and creating music together, especially with our classmates and friends who we had not seen since March. After recording, we were able to do a percussion unit led by our student teacher, and as a wind player, it was very interesting to learn about different instruments that I haven't played before. For the past 2 months, hybrid students have been able to play more regularly indoors in our individual classes with social distancing, masks, and bell covers, and remote students have been able to follow along on Zoom. Though our groups are relatively well balanced, our smaller groups have caused people who are now in smaller sections than they're used to further develop their musical skills by being more comfortable playing out and even in solo parts. Overall, for me, band is always the class where I've been able to relax, be creative, and collaborate with my friends, and it always helps me get through a stressful school day. Being able to play more typical concert-style music indoors with a full ensemble has truly been one of the highlights of my unusual school year. And I know I speak for all of my peers when I say that we are so grateful for this opportunity to play indoors that so many schools have not had this year. Next, to talk about more ensembles, I'll pass it off to Kira Sward. So for the jazz program at HHS, although it looks very different this year, I was able to start up again. In normal years, we have 2 groups, Jazz Ensemble and Jazz Lab, one being an audition-only group and one for anyone who'd like to join. In past years, Jazz Ensembles rehearsed multiple hours a week with both sectionals and full rehearsals. We also had many, many performances throughout the year. When the world shut down last March, jazz is one of the things I miss most. I never realized how much I would miss getting to school at 6:30 in the morning to rehearse. And I never realized just how important music was to my life every single day. But being able to start my day playing and creating music with such a wonderful group of musicians is something that I truly cherish. Now, we are able to rehearse as a combined group for 1 hour a week in the HHS auditorium following COVID-19 guidelines. We are preparing music that we hope to play this spring at the Pops concert. Although I still truly miss the way our jazz program was before COVID, being able to finally rehearse and explore a genre of music that we do not have the opportunity to play in school is something that I am truly grateful for. With orchestra, luckily, they have been able to rehearse the most out of all of our ensembles. While they have not been able to perform or practice in their individual sections, orchestra students have been playing in their smaller in-school classes all year socially distanced and with masks. Orchestra members have also been learning more music theory and have been working on individual recordings for asynchronous work. At the beginning of the year, as with all the groups this year, there were some technical difficulties, but students feel that Mr. Brody handled the transition to the hybrid model very well. One student even said that the setup makes it feel like Mr. Brody is physically there with them in class. The orchestra has been working on new music since the start of the semester and are now transitioning into new songs for the second semester. And now I'll pass it off to Elizabeth Kane to speak more about chorus.
Hi, so I'm a senior in chorus this year, and chorus has certainly had to look very different as like vocal music and singing is the most dangerous type of musical activity with regards to COVID safety protocols. So for us hybrid in-person students, we have not been able to sing together in school with the exception of a few trips outside in the fall when the weather was nice to sing outside. And on top of that, Mr. Brody teaching remotely kind of makes singing outside a little bit harder. But it's definitely doable and rewarding once it's done. With that being said, chorus this year has had to have a greater emphasis on vocal independence and having to make strides in songs that are typically taught to us in school by Mr. Brody by ourselves at home. Choral pieces that in a normal year, we would typically spend months rehearsing and fine-tuning in class, we've had to learn and teach ourselves using virtual tools and online supplements. However, I truly do believe that this emphasis on independent musical learning has pushed us and challenged us as students in different ways than typically would, and have allowed us to become stronger and more independent musicians. In particular, we've been taking advantage of a software called Soundtrap to work on recording parts of our songs individually, as well as individual or small group collaborative songwriting projects. We have also been able to dive deeper into music theory than we would have time for in a normal year, which has helped build a strong foundation we can apply to all of our musical learning as well. We have been able to keep the after-school additional choral ensembles running again this year. Both the men's chorus and noteworthy ensemble were opened up to all students this year, whereas in past years, men's chorus was typically just for male voices and noteworthy was normally just a female voices audition-only group. And Noteworthy right now is working on future possibilities of performing in person, but also working on recording some music at home, hopefully that we can share. They recently started a few new pieces as well as continuing a piece from last year that we did not get to perform. And their focus is on performing challenging yet manageable pieces with a small group. Men's chorus is also working on a song from last year called Parting Glass, which is in the process of being recorded each person individually from home. Both groups are rehearsing remotely only, although they hope to rehearse in person soon and are learning pieces they are hoping to perform together eventually in the spring. Also, the music department has introduced a new performing arts ensemble open to the whole school. This group is open to anyone at HHS and has served as a place for students in the band, chorus, and orchestra, as well as the HHS Drama Club to reconvene virtually. The Performing Arts Ensemble has had a masterclass style performance to help students preparing for districts at a time in the fall, as well as just giving feedback to students on personal projects. I'll hand it over to Madison again for the closing.
While this school year has been difficult for all of us, adjusting to new ways of teaching and learning and new classroom environments have presented unique challenges. As we move into semester 2, we continue to work together as a department to perform safely and create a safe and welcoming space for all students. We want to thank you for your time as well as your support, and publicly thank Mr. Hay and Mr. Brody for their hard work to help us all learn and persevere. They've been driving themselves crazy to help us succeed, and we appreciate that more than they know. Hopefully, we'll be able to show you all what we've been working on this year in person in the spring. Please feel free to ask us any questions.
Wow. Wow is all I'm going to start with wow. I have as you probably know, a real soft spot for the music department. So I will, before I say anything, I'll just open this up to my colleagues. Does anyone have any questions for our great musicians or our great director of the music program, Mr. Hay?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you who've commented on the music program. I'm so glad to hear the creativity that you and your faculty and advisors have taken this year to be able to advance the program, because a lot of people just kind of gave up. So I'm glad you found ways around it and ways to work within the restrictions, and everybody's staying healthy and making great music. So keep it up. I'm glad to hear about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
I just wanted to echo, sorry, Nancy, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to echo those sentiments. I love seeing this infusion of a new energy into learning about music, even though we have to do it ethereally. And I remember early in the fall, seeing you, Mr. Hay, on a field with students spread apart at great distances with instruments. And I don't think anything made me feel as lighthearted that month as that image of you with the students out there. It just felt so right bringing them together as a community to make music. So thank you for everything.
So agree with everything that has been said. I had the opportunity to catch some of the HCAM recordings in the fall and I'm so blown away by the ability of students and the faculty and your entire department to take what would seem like insurmountable obstacles. Music in a pandemic didn't seem like it would be able to come out and be such a positive thing for students, and yet it's great to hear people. It's really exciting to hear about POPs potentially in the spring. That is something that I look forward to every year. I know was last year so disappointing. Initially, when Micah was canceled, I don't think anybody foresaw how long this would be drawn out. But kudos to all of you, and thank you. Sincerely, we are so lucky as a district to have such dedicated, just inspirational faculty, and it's so great that we can have you here both from science and music tonight. So thank you.
I want to echo that a little bit and also add in that I think it is amazing that something that is tearing so many people apart has also been used to create opportunities for students to learn things that normally they would not learn at their age, right? So the asynchronous singing, the recording, the small group, it's very hard to come out of your comfort zone when you're like in a chorus and you're surrounded by other people. Your voice blends and it's fun, but it's really hard to be out there in front of people. And so having that experience, I think it's pretty amazing that the students are seeing all these positive effects, and it's pretty amazing that the music department pivoted so well and have given them so many opportunities. So it's very appreciated. Thank you.
Beautifully said by everybody. It's Mr. Hay and all of the musicians and all of the scientists and Ms. Smith and Ms. Murphy. I mean, I think hearing we have the biggest science fair program, around, and hearing and knowing actually personally and seeing how many students are able to engage in musical endeavors across either small ensemble work or in classes or, chorus, orchestra, and band and jazz and so forth. The amount of opportunities that you guys all provide for our students and the energy that you bring that motivates kids to get excited about your disciplines is just invaluable. And I'm thrilled that you guys have been able to continue, and I have a soft spot for jazz band, and I saw the pep band out in the field, and I love it all, and the science fair. I mean, just kudos to all of you, and thank you so much. I really don't want this segment of our meeting to end. I wish you could stay and just tell us more, because it's great, and we so appreciate it. Mr. Hay, did you want to?
And I just wanted to publicly thank HCAM between Jim Cousins, Mike Tarosian, and John Ritz. They're working so hard to try to make some of the things that we talked about this summer happen. Of course, we're all using new technology, and their learning curve is just as big as ours to help present everything that we're doing at the schools out to families. So they're working really hard, and I just wanted to thank them for their efforts as well.
And I would like to thank you, Mr. Hay, for the kids on our call tonight. What you don't know is that behind the scenes, Mrs. Parson, Mr. Hay, and I met in the summer. And Mr. Hay was saying things like, well, maybe we could just, and I kept thinking, he's out of his mind. Brass instruments, woodwind instruments, voice, there's no possible way. I thought we would have our doors closed by October. And so congratulations to all of you. And thank you to your teachers, because if you weren't if you didn't persevere so hard and think so hard out of the box, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you for what you've done. It's been amazing, truly amazing. Way more than I ever anticipated. If you had asked me in July, I would not have believed we'd be here today.
Thank you so much. And good luck. But I'm going to be at that Pops concert, virtually or otherwise. So I'm going to be watching for that. Good luck. I hope it happens. Fingers crossed. And thank you
Keep it
so
up,
much.
everybody. Good job in both science and music.
Yes.
Okay, so I wish we could linger, but we're going to move in to the superintendent's report. Dr. Kavanaugh.
So did we not have any public comment? Just checking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nancy, I didn't see any before. Did you catch any that I missed?
I did not. I saw 2 emails that were not marked for public comment, but nothing for public comment.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I saw as well. So no public comments today. Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right, the superintendent's report for this evening is very brief. Just primarily some COVID updates. So this is the report for January 19th, 2021. A very quick update on enrollment. We try to do this every once in a while. And so you can see where we are now. As you can see, we have approved 471 students. We've had 177 students exit the district. Currently, our enrollment, and this does not include the preschool up on top here, but from K to 12, we have 3,858. This was updated on the 15th of January. If you add in the students at Keefe Tech, at Norfolk Aggie, 10 at charter schools, and 26 out of district, as well as 81 students who are in the pre-K, we currently have 4,006 students. And I know sometimes people will say, why is it that you are adding in kids who are at Keefe Tech or kids who are at Norfolk Aggie? And I just keep them in there because, really the community does financially support their tuitions. So they are all of our kids. They are Hopkinton kids who are just attending school somewhere else. All right, every week I say to the committee, we've got to get these kids vaccinated for the flu vaccine. We've got to make sure parents do this. Please help us. Our school nurses are going to have to do all of that paperwork. And then on Friday, January 15th, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health removed that requirement for school-age children. So even though I've been asking all of these weeks, probably since August, people no longer have to do that. So I do want to thank all of the families who did get their children vaccinated. That was really great. And I think, that is part of the reason why others don't have to do it, because what we're seeing in the preliminary data is that we're really having a very mild flu season. And, presumably it's because people did get the vaccine, and presumably it's because we are all wearing masks and practicing social distancing. So no longer a requirement. If you wish to have your child flu vaccinated, you can certainly do that. It's still a recommendation, but no longer a requirement. All right, and I sometimes have requests to take a look at where are we with the vaccine. We are not in the best place right now. I think this probably started for us sometime around last Thursday. As you know, the high school, we were sure was going remote on Friday, and we knew that earlier in the day. And then we had some concerns around COVID and transportation, and so we decided that we would have the entire district go remote on Friday. Today, we are back fully, except that the high school will still be out on remote for our Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. Thursday, the 21st, will be their return day. So if we take a look overall this year, the high school has had 23 cases. Currently, we have 3 active cases that are adults and 4 active cases who are students. Overall, our quarantine numbers are very high. We have 11 adults and 49 students who are currently quarantined. So if people are wondering, are you still doing contact tracing at the high school? Couldn't that have gone more quickly? The answer to that is that's not the problem. Right now, we have just so many adults and so many kids who would be out of school that there would be a significant interruption really to teaching and learning. Sometimes it's just more effective to use the model where teachers are teaching from home and kids are learning at home. That way their kids have access to their high quality, their own instructors, the ones who have been teaching those courses for a very long time, as opposed to coming into the high school and having a substitute teacher in front of them. At the middle school, overall number of cases has been 19. We have one active case, which is a student, and we have no adults and 12 students who are currently quarantined. And those numbers at the middle school may have even changed this afternoon, but this was updated just earlier today. At Hopkins, we've had 6 cases overall, no active, no quarantined people. At Elmwood, we've had 13 cases overall, 1 active. So right now we have 1 quarantined student. At Marathon, we've had 18 cases overall. Currently, there is 1 active case. And in terms of quarantining, we have 8 adults who are currently out and 24 students. The 24 students are, primarily just a couple of classrooms, so they're not scattered throughout the building. And at the district level, we've had 2 cases overall. One of those cases is still active, and we have 1 person currently quarantined. Over here on the right-hand side of that, the district has had 81 cases overall. 21 have been adults, 60 have been students. Our current active number of cases, all told, is 11, and we currently have 106 people across the district quarantined, which is the highest number we have had to date, clearly. This is great news. History is made. Our first formal vaccination in the Hopkinton Public Schools. The nurse at the middle school, Kelly Burke, went and got her vaccination yesterday. She went to Gillette, and voila, there is a picture of Kelly at Gillette after her vaccination. So we are very excited. The nurses will continue throughout the week to have that first round. They make up the last leg of phase 1. So they are considered to be non-COVID facing health professionals. Last leg of phase 1, all of our nurses will be getting vaccinated. The first dose anyway. All right, and that is really all I have for you for my superintendent's report tonight.
Any questions?
So last week you reported that there has only been 1 case of transmission and it was adult to adult. Is that still the case?
That is no longer the case. We have had another adult to adult transmission of the virus in school.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. Are you able to share my chair report?
I do believe I have it open here.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'll take the next slide, please. So I want to take just a minute. I put this in the chair report. We're going to be voting the budget later tonight, but I put this in the chair report because I have a personal perspective, having spent a lot of time over the last week thinking about our budget, thinking about the community, our taxpayers, our school needs, and the whole the whole universe of considerations. And I wanted to just share, as I've done some thinking about this, I want to share this with the committee and the community just as food for thought. So if I'll take the next slide. The slides are kind of busy because it was clearly a collection of my thoughts over the last couple of weeks, but I was trying to think about how the town is doing. How is the town doing right now, and how are we doing as residents? How are businesses doing? And, I looked at a few different things. The housing market is extremely strong right now. I was surprised to learn on Realtor.com that in December, our median list price of homes was up 13.6% year over year. It's a pandemic, but I think, based on where people are looking to live and how people are choosing to find spaces maybe with more square footage for home offices and whatnot, there's certainly housing movement out there. Unemployment in town is about 5% right now, according to mass.gov. And, it's a little bit lower than it was in October. It's about twice what it was at the same time in 2019. So it's tough and recovering. And, we have to acknowledge that there are families who have made employment decisions so that they can support their students in hybrid and remote learning. There are people who've had to cut back hours or change job situations, and we do recognize that and greatly appreciate that. Resident financials are kind of variable. Some people are really, really struggling. Others have been able to shift to remote and are doing quite well. We do know that there's been some tax relief available this year and mortgage and rent relief available on the town side through CARES Act funding. And meals are being provided, but it's kind of a mixed bag. Everyone has a unique story. In resident well-being, the student needs are kind of ongoing. We're still providing some school supplies and snacks and clothing and masks and whatever, largely through the Bridge Subcommittee. Physical health needs, as Dr. Kavanaugh was just talking about, our COVID cases are the highest ever. It's a tough time right now for the virus. And the quarantining does impact employment and education for a lot of people. And we, of course, have a huge demand on public services, public health services, doing contact tracing and managing this pandemic for us. Mental health needs, we're hearing, are high right now. People who had existing mental health concerns are struggling, and there are new considerations around depression, anxiety, trauma, isolation. It's challenging. Our town finances are pretty strong as of the town meeting in September. Our cash reserves are strong, our bond rating is good. The outlook for the future is a little uncertain, but right now I think things are, as of September, we're looking strong. And revenue, as I said, there's uncertainty on the horizon. We do have new growth declining, maybe some unpredictable state funding, pandemic recovery funding is unknown, and we have been managing our tax levy capacity with underrides so that we try to keep it manageable for residents. In businesses, some are doing great and some have struggled, pivoted, or had to close. So it's a really interesting time in Hopkinton and all around us in which to be thinking about budgets, which is what brought me to this, looking at this. So if we take the next slide, Dr. Kavanaugh. So thinking about this, I couldn't help but think how inextricably linked the schools are to the well-being of the town. And so when we look at the different dimensions that I was kind of thinking about this week, we look at the housing market. Well, certainly people are moving here. We hear it over and over again for our excellent schools. And families who are moving here are really demanding excellence from us and investment in our schools. And we as a school committee are trying to do our best to invest wisely and maintain and advance the mission of the schools. Unemployment, as I mentioned before, again, there's a direct link to schools. We have pivoted to hybrid and remote learning for our students, for most of our students, and people have had to make some difficult choices around jobs, and we recognize that. Resident financials, again, the schools do provide, our main provider of food, counseling, childcare, and increasingly schools provide initial social services to children. So, sort of across all of these dimensions, when I think about, school spending and school investment and taxpayers and value, and I can't help but see the interrelation of where our schools are with where our community is. In the second column, we have student needs. The schools are providing technology and supplies, and really that helps ensure equity so that all families have tablets, have access to technology and so forth. And teachers are often the first to recognize that when there are needs in the household. Physical needs, our schools are a controlled COVID environment right now. We've done a really good job and have seen no student-to-student COVID spread, as Dr. Kavanaugh has said. And our school nurses, I'm so thrilled that they're getting the vaccine. They have been working like crazy, both as that first line of triage when the students come to the office and dealing with the students who are ill or not feeling well, but also doing contact tracing in their off hours, in their free time, spending all of their weekends and nights helping with that. For mental health, as we all know, when we're back at school in our communities and back at work in our work communities, it's a sense of normalcy, and it helps remove that feeling of isolation, some of the stress and anxiety. In town finances, we know we need to provide support for people who are struggling. We know there are taxpayers who are having a hard time right now. And we know too that we have passed underrides in the past that limit our levy capacity. But we also acknowledge that, there may be a time when we need an override if necessary. Town revenue-wise, Our new growth is still growing, but the rate of new growth is slowing. And we know that we can't fund ongoing operations forever, and we can't, with one-time funding. So if we tap one-time funds, which we may have to do with stabilization funds on the town side or the school side, it could build an unsustainable base. So as we think about our budget, we're concerned about town revenue. And business financials, as we heard with the science fair, there's a real connection right now that has been built up both with CVTE and STEM staff to connect our schools with our businesses, whether it's with internships or science fair judges or supplies and materials. There's a real synergy and a real support network for our students with our businesses. So, again, I'm just sort of sharing with you my own musings this week as we get into this budget vote about how we are all so interconnected and how what is happening in the town financially, what's happening to families, what's happening in the schools, it's all related. And kind of brings me, Dr. Kavanaugh, to the next slide. My conclusion of this line of thinking is that when we spend dollars on the schools, we are really supporting pandemic recovery for everybody. And I think I just share this again. It's in the chair report because it's my own thinking about this, but I do think there is a lot provided to the town from the schools, and it sort of is helping shape my understanding of our budget, and we can talk about that later. So thank you for indulging me that. On regular business, Dr. Kavanaugh will advance. In other news. The Capital Improvements Committee met on the 13th, I believe, and we had, really general support for our articles and some inquiry about our marathon proposal and whether or not there might be opportunities to save in the long run by adding all 6 potential extension classrooms at once. I think we've currently requested 4. But there's a slot for another 2. So we had said that we'd get back to them with that number. I don't know that the budget would support that, but I think it is responsible to ask, if we're going in there and we're bringing in engineers and so forth, and we think we're going to need all 6 classrooms eventually, might it be a good time to just at least get the numbers? The Budget Advisory Committee met on the 14th, and we talked a lot about financial drivers for the budget and tax impact targets. And I wanted to share that I have reached out to about a dozen area school committee chairs to kind of launch a round table. I reached out today and just kind of said, hey, our superintendents have sort of job-alike places to talk with people in other districts. Our administrators often have job-alike contacts in other districts. And it's been a busy and a bit of a lonely year for school committees, kind of working in their districts. And I think I barely had send pushed on the email to these 12 people that I do not know who are chairs in other districts. And my inbox was flooded with, yes, please, right now, let's meet. We'd like to talk, et cetera. So, I'm really excited about the opportunity to set up a roundtable so that school committee chairs and vice chairs or designees can have a chance to talk to each other. We all know how busy and challenging this year has been, and hopefully this will provide another resource for us and for the other districts. So right now, the response was so quick, I was kind of overwhelmed. I have to find a way to schedule now across 12 people a meeting in February. And at that meeting, those who attend will talk about what we want it to look like and how frequently we want to meet, et cetera. And in addition to that, I have approved payroll warrants 21046 and 21047 included in the packet, and I've also approved payroll warrant S21015 also included in your packet. I think that's it for slides, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Liaison report. Does anyone have a liaison report?
So, oh, go ahead.
Let's go with Joe first.
The Growth Study Committee is moving forward. Dr. Kavanaugh and I are both engaged in that, and they continue to express interest in getting our opinion on growth in the student population, so we share that. And they're looking to create stronger ties across the relevant functions of town hall, which should help all of us ultimately too.
Thank you. Leah?
So on Sunday, along with the Islamic Muslimin Center of New England and the Hopkinton Youth and Family Services, the Hopkinton Freedom Team helped to sponsor a MLK Day celebration for, it was about an hour Zoom meeting where we had a talk on unity and peace, and it was really well attended. There were over 90 something people on the actual Zoom call. So we will be having another meeting on Wednesday. That is my report.
Thank you. Nancy?
I have a quick one as well, just to say that the bridge was approached and provided snacks and waters for the elementary schools as another go around, that they have been using what that we have been able to get from them. And special thanks to Project Just Because, who actually collects the food for us to be able to get it to the schools. We also provided some earbuds to the middle school and have continued just to take requests as they're given to us to connect with resources in the community. It does feel like we've reached a greater awareness within the schools that we are able to access resources when they can't always directly in the school.
Terrific. Thank you.
A quick announcement. There's a CPAC meeting taking place right now. So if you're tired of us, you can watch something else. It's about support services, finding self-support services for families from the Department of Developmental something or other. What is the DDS?
It's Developmental Disability Services.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And also our reopening planning committee meets for the first time tomorrow, and we will meet fairly regularly on Wednesdays moving forward. So that is something to look forward to.
Great, thank you. And I had a HOP Coalition meeting today. We are still working very hard to prepare the grant for drug-free communities, which would provide sustained funding for, I think, 3 years. If we get this grant, we're working with a consultant who's walking us through the grant writing. And we have a retreat of sorts, a virtual retreat of sorts, in a few weeks to really dive deep on the grant application together. So I will keep you posted. All right, office hours. I am gonna forward that back to email and just request that we get a little more response on the email next time so we can find a date. I think we'll work that offline for efficiency. That brings us to new business. Dr. Kavanaugh, we have the Hopkins School gift account.
Yes, so we have received a request from Mrs. Valello to accept a check in the amount of $4,646.95. And this money comes to us from a Meadow Farms online fundraiser at the Hopkins School. That money will be put in the Hopkins School gift account.
Nice. I'll entertain a motion to accept that or discussion if you'd like.
And make a motion to accept the amount.
Thank you, Meg.
Second. I'll second that.
Motion by Meg, second by Nancy. And I need to do a roll call vote. Leah?
Yes.
Meg?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you very much. That brings us to the Hopkinton High School Science Department grant, which we heard such great things about, but now we get to officially talk about it.
We did hear great things about it. So what we've done for this agenda item is we have kind of bundled the $10,000 and $5,000 grants. So you have a $10,000 cash grant that will go to the Hopkinton High School Science Department, and you have a $5,000 paid independent study that will go to Ms. Murphy, and what she will be doing with that is sort of broadening her professionalism around being the science fair advisor. So if it's okay with you, we have bundled that into a request to accept from the Mass Science Fair, specifically from Genzyme, $15,000 to be given to the Hopkinton High School Science Department.
It's just phenomenal. It's phenomenal that that program and those girls with their project were able to accomplish so much and give so much back. And it's amazing. I will entertain a motion. I'm sure we'll have one to accept this $15,000 grant.
So moved.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Leah, and a roll call vote. Leah,
Aye.
Meg,
Aye.
Nancy,
Yes.
Joe,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Thank you so much to all involved. Okay, that brings us to the school committee vote on the fiscal year 22 budget. Dr. Kavanaugh, I think we are going to hand that to you for a presentation of the budget slides one more time.
Yes.
Thank
Even
you.
though we've done it a few times, because tonight is the vote, I think it's important that we go through the slides one more time. Perhaps we can do it with a little more brevity than we've done it in the past. I think last week at the budget hearing, we spent a lot of time on them. But I will present sort of those contextual slides, and then Mrs. Rothermick can do the actual budgeting slides. So I will take the screen and we'll get through them quickly. All right. So as Mrs. Fargiano, Chair of the School Committee, just said, this is the evening when the school committee will be voting on my recommended budget. This is the FY22 budget for the Hopkinton Public Schools. To contextualize just a little bit, we've been saying that there have been 3 uncertainties in this budgeting process. The first is enrollment. We are really unsure whether or not there will be a spike in enrollment in the Hopkinton Public Schools in the 21-22 school year. And I can explain a little bit more about that as I go. We have $187,000 that were budgeted in the Hopkinton Public Schools for PPE. We really do not know what the situation will look like in the fall. I mean, even if everyone by the time we get to August 28th is immunized, will we still need to get hand sanitizer and paper towels and masks and all of those things that have been proven to reduce the spread of COVID-19? And then finally, we are entering into contract negotiations with the Teachers Association, the paraprofessionals, and the school nurses. So there are 3 bargaining units that we will be looking to negotiate, and obviously that comes with pay increases in the FY22 fiscal year. So when we were putting this budget together, we did in fact conduct budget meetings with all of the stakeholders across the district. And that means people who are directors of departments. So say, for example, technology, special education, and all of our curriculum leaders and building principals. Everyone contributes to what this budget looks like. And I think we've said it many, many times that we were pretty conservative, knowing that we are in the midst of a pandemic and knowing that the financial picture is really unclear as to what things will look like in the next fiscal year. We whittled this budget down to sort of bare bones and said, what do we think we're really going to need, genuinely need, as we emerge from this pandemic? So it was very important to us to maintain our exceptional academic and extracurricular programs. And I think tonight what you saw from Mr. Hay and his students, as well as Ms. Smith and Ms. Murphy and their students, it's just incredible the kinds of things that are happening in our schools academically and extracurricularly. We want to make sure that our curricula and our instruction meet the needs of all of our learners. There's obviously great disparity in what all of our kids know and are able to do. And we want to make sure that every child, when they come through the front door of their school building every day, gets what that individual child needs. So in order to meet those goals, we want to be able to add teachers and support staff to accommodate the increases in student population. And we do think we're going to be seeing that next September. We have to look at the resulting growth as it impacts all departments. So sometimes we just think that with an additional 20 students, we may need to hire another second grade teacher, for example. But in reality, that comes with hiring more occupational therapists or more people who need to work in central office human resources, or more people who need to be working in student information systems and those kinds of places, because with more kids come more teachers and more needs across the district. We are focusing on our students' needs, not that just that are academic, but also the social emotional learning needs. Especially as we come out of the pandemic, we have some kids who have not physically been in a brick and mortar setting since March 10th of 2019. And so, it's been a very, 2020. So it's been a very long time for them. And when we think about that, it could be 18 months from the time that they left school till when they will be rejoining us in the fall of 2021. And obviously the pandemic has, had its impact on not just adults and not just our community, but also some of our even youngest learners. So we want to be prepared for students of all ages to meet their social emotional needs. And finally, the budget was developed with the school improvement plans in mind. All right, and I know that I always like to show the per pupil expenditures. So what you're seeing on the screen right now are the per pupil expenditures according to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for the year 2017. And as you're looking at this, you can see that in a list of 33 communities, and to be honest with you, we chose them because they are, in some cases, like Hopkinton. They're communities that we think are sort of, competitive with us, or maybe they just share a border with us, or maybe we think demographically they're similar to us. So that's how those communities got onto this list. And in 2017, you can see we were 24th out of 33 with a per pupil expenditure of $14,557. When we advance this to 2019, you can see that we have gone from 24 to 31. So we are really third from last on this list. And yet you'll see on following slides that our ranking across Massachusetts and across the nation is incredibly high. One thing that might be interesting on this particular slide is that the state average, so across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the average per pupil expenditure is $17,149. Here in Hopkinton, we are doing amazing things, and I truly mean amazing, with a per pupil expenditure of $15,086 per student. So just to take a look at a couple of our accolades, our niche ranking said that we were first out of 238 districts with the very best teachers. We were first out of 237 districts with a ranking of being one of the best place to teach in Massachusetts. And clearly out of 219, we ranked first of all the school districts in Massachusetts. Not dissimilarly, Hopkinton High School, according to U.S. News and World Report, ranked us as third in Massachusetts. And sometimes when we look at these rankings, we say, well, we're third, but we are behind an exam school and behind a charter school, or those kinds of things. So I really do like to think of us as being the first ranked public high school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So our FY22 approach, when we built the budget, it was built on the students who are here now. We did do some work with a consultant, Dr. Arthur Wagman, who has done this kind of work for us before. And what we're really looking at is, not planning for a huge influx of students, but to think about the kids who are here now with slight increases in the 21-22 school year. So we were very, very conservative in looking at our personnel requests. We based them on the numbers of kids present and low numbers of anticipated students. So that has us just a little bit worried. One of the things that I want to show you is that the last time Dr. Wagman did a prediction for us, he estimated that by the time we got to the end of the school year, we would be at 4,111 students. And so if you take a look at where we are today, we're at 3,939. This slide has been recently updated. So the difference between his prediction for the end of this school year and where we are right now is 172 students. And so we might say, oh, that's great, we've lost kids. We haven't lost kids. We technically have a gain of 58 students from last year to this year at this point in time. And who knows where we will end up by the time we reach June 15th. So while it looks like there's, a difference that is for this school year, we will, obviously be inviting more students in all the time. And there are still, a good 5 months left for us to be adding students to our enrollment data. All right, so why am I worried about so many kids returning? And these are the reasons right here. We did some research and we thought, okay, if we take a look at the October 1st SIMS data from 2019, and we compared it to the October 1st SIMS data for 2020. In 2019, the number of students who had withdrawn from the Hopkinton Public Schools were 97. This year, we had 159 students withdraw from Hopkinton Public Schools. And if we think just back a few minutes ago to when Mrs. Fargiano was showing us, some of that real estate data, we have houses that are turning all the time here in Hopkinton. So what I'm led to believe, because people will tell us that they moved to Hopkinton for the public schools, is that, the people who are buying these homes really intend to send their kids to school here. So if the 159 students who have withdrawn, if many of those students are really planning to come back and that they have really withdrawn, if you go to the right-hand side of this slide, for things like homeschooling or to go to a private school in the state of Massachusetts that might have in-person learning every day. The numbers on that are, 20 students reported that when they were leaving for homeschooling, and 48 reported that they were leaving for private in-state school. So that's at least 68 kids that we're looking at that we say, I wonder if those kids might be coming back next year, in addition to the kids who are moving in right now. Only 50 students said that they were leaving to go to an out-of-state public or private school. A couple of them may be going to private schools outside of the state of Massachusetts and could come back. But typically when a student moves out of state to go to another public school or moves out of Hopkinton and goes to another public school in Massachusetts, those kids are not coming back. Just to take a really quick look at the homeschooling data, in the 2019 school year, we had 18 kids who had submitted homeschooling plans to the district. And in 2020, we had, at the start of this school year, we had 34 who had submitted homeschooling plans. So we really do believe that a lot of our homeschooling kids and our private school kids will be coming back to us in the fall of 21. All right, so if our projection for next year, in addition to the kids that we have sitting in front of us today, is 74 students, what we are, kind of thinking about here is that every 20 students on average require 1.4 teachers. And so if we take the 74 students that we're anticipating and we round that up to 4 groups of 20 students, and we take those 4 groups and we multiply them times the 1.4 FTEs, or teachers, we see that we probably have that need for 5.6 teachers. And that number will come up when Mrs. Rothmick is doing her budgeting portion of this presentation. So we are thinking, what if we actually do have a lot of kids return to us that we haven't thought about? And what if there are needs, social emotional needs, that we haven't quite planned for because they are much greater than we anticipate right now? One of the things that we're thinking about doing is using some of our host community agreement monies. And I know that that's an agenda item this evening as well. So that's our plan for a safety net in the event that we exceed our 74 students and in the event that we need more in the way of social emotional support for our kids. And now I will hand things over to Mrs. Rodmick.
Thank you. So as you can see, just starting from the FY21 operating budget of $51,206,000, the requested budget right now reflects a salary request increase of $2,145,000 and an expense increase of $802,000 for a total increase of $2,947,000 509, which would represent a 5.8% increase. So this is just a quick look. Again, we're a service industry, so 80% of our budget falls into the salary line, where only 20% is in the expense line. The same budget by educational program. The largest piece, of course, is regular education at 54%, followed by student services at 22%. Just another way of looking at the budget. And again, by cost center, the way you want to really look at this is your elementary schools are all around the same, hovering in that 7% range. And then students, the education gets more expensive as they matriculate through the school. So middle school at a 12% of the budget and high school at 18%. So drilling down into the salaries, the contractual obligations is 1,186,000 and staff requests at 959,000 represents just within salaries a 5.2% increase. So the salary increases, again, the contractual at 1,186,000. The requests are for special education, 7.4 FTEs at 277. Instructional cost enrollment growth, 5.4 at 362,000. Instructional program enhancements, 1.6 FTEs at 130,000. Administrative support and facility enhancements, 4.2 FTEs at 188,000. And again, reflecting back that 5.4 FTEs for instructional cost and enrollment growth to the previous slide that Dr. Kavanaugh spoke about in terms of those additional 74 students and the number of FTEs that you would plan for that. So looking at drilling that down further, student services, 7.4 FTEs represents a 0.5 FTE for teaching, 4.1 FTE for paraprofessionals, 1.0 for BCBA, 0.4 for occupational therapy, 1.2 for nursing, and a 0.2 for support. Instructional cost, 2.4 FTE teaching for Elmwood, and a 1.0 each for middle school, high school, and ESOL instruction. Instructional program enhancements, Elmwood, a 1.0 FTE for adjustment counselor, and a 0.6 for math coach K-5. Administrative support and facility enhancements is a 1.0 each for technology, custodian, administrative support, and a paraprofessional, and a 0.2 for the HR department. Looking at the expense side, again, it's an 802,000 increase in expenses. So that's an 8% increase just on the expense side. Again, looking by educational program, your largest piece when you look at from the expense side is student services, followed by buildings and grounds. Building and grounds, of course, represents all your infrastructure and all your buildings, and then followed after that is your transportation cost. So again, expenses that are contractual, inflationary, or on just your current services at 231,000. Special education expenses at 42,000, instructional cost, enrollment growth, and the replacement cycle at 333,000. Instructional program enhancement expenses are 0 at this time. Administrative support and facility enhancements at 195 for the total expense increase request of 802,000. So the contractual inflation and current services of 231 represents transportation, central office, athletics, and building and grounds departments. In student services, it represents the transportation and contracted services. Instructional cost, enrollment growth, and replacement cycles are within the regular education, technology, and vocational tuition. Again, instructional program enhancements are at 0. Administrative support and facility enhancements are within the building and grounds and central office departments. Contractual inflation and current services within transportation represents a contractual increase of 47,000 and a loss of bus fee revenue offset of 50,000. Building and grounds, again, a loss of a building use revenue offset of 77,000. Central office represents a 66,000 increase in legal, offset by $29,000 decrease in a one-time expenditure in the prior year. Athletics is a $6,000 transportation contractual increase, $4,000 in officials, and the rates are set by the MIAA. And a $9,000 in supplies that are being reinstated from a cut that was done in FY21. For student services, that represents a $26,000 increase in transportation. Again, that's based on student need and our assessment. $20,000 increase in contractual services offset by some miscellaneous decreases. With instructional costs, enrollment growth, and replacement cycles, in technology, there's $136,000 for Chromebook refresh for the middle school and a laptop teacher refresh at the high school. $129,000 in software increases, for example, for Zoom, Panopto, Schoology, and enrollment-driven increases in PowerSchool, Renaissance Learning, etc. Offset by a decrease of $73,000 of one-time prior year purchase. Regular education, middle school, $15,000 for textbooks, PD, and supplies. High school, $34,000 for textbooks and supplies. Curriculum, $57,000, again for textbooks. And these are all offset by some minor elementary school decreases. Vocational tuitions, this is based on actual student enrollment. Again, instructional program enhancement expenses are at 0. For administrative support and facility enhancements, there is in this budget still at this time, building and grounds, the PPE, hand sanitizer, and additional cleaning of 187. And central office is software to manage the smart IDs and enhance the bus navigation. So summing all those back up again, the FY21 base budget of $51,206,000, contractual inflation and current services, and this is the sum of both the salary and the expense size of $1,417,000. The increased costs for special education at $319,000. The instructional costs and enrollment growth at $695,000. Instructional program enhancements at $130,000. And administrative support facility enhancements at $383,000. Again, this budget represents a 5.8% increase. There has been discussion about whether or not to pull out that $187,000, and the town would carry that cost as part of a $200,000 townwide PPE line item. If the committee wishes to do that, that would reduce the budget down to $53,966,911, and that would represent a 5.4% increase.
Thank you very much, Susan and Carol. Just to clarify the process, and I don't know that we need the slides anymore, Dr. Kavanaugh. I think we're probably.
Thank you.
Sorry. So if we wanted to take out that PPE placeholder, should we indicate that in our vote tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we are voting tonight on this budget. And I thank you for indulging the going through the slides again. It's a lot of money. It's complicated, and it's good to hear it. It may seem tedious to folks at home, but I think it is useful to spend the time. We're voting the budget tonight with what we know. In parallel, there is a select board meeting, and they're talking about budgets as well. There is still a gap in, based on where the select board had originally wanted to set the tax impact for the community, and based on all of the really level services budgets, primarily across the town and the school, there still is a gap that the town finance folks and the town manager and the select board, they're working very hard to figure out how to close that gap. So we can vote this budget tonight with or without the PPE or any other changes that we want. We can talk about that. But it is possible that we will be asked to, consider other factors. And one of the things that may come up, and it has come up in conversation, though it hasn't come up as a direct ask quite yet, is the concept of pulling additional money out of the HCA Legacy Farms host community agreement money to balance the operational budget for fiscal year 22. We are going to talk about in our next agenda item, money that we had already determined as a committee we need to have for unanticipated need in the fall. We need to have access to. There may be a request to have a pull for money for known needs to support the operational budget. I asked to defer that from tonight. I don't want to bring that to a vote tonight. I don't want to make that request of you tonight because I wanted some more information from the finance folks about what's driving that need, et cetera. As I look at the sort of financial picture, I don't sit in the seat of the town CFO or the town manager, admittedly, but I get concerned down the line if we're using too much one-time funding in our operational budget today. So I want to really make sure before I ask you to consider that we have full understanding of what's generating that request, if that request does come forward. So just full disclosure, we may have to have another meeting as a school committee before February 3rd, which is when the town meeting articles are submitted. So you may see probably one agenda item meeting if we do have to consider an HCA allocation. So with that all said, what comments, questions, or suggestions do we have before we take a vote?
So I have two things. One is a question, and then I have a comment. So my question is, for the 187,000 PPE, my understanding, and I may be incorrect, is that as a board, within the budget area, we can move money around. Is that correct? Like we can vote to move certain funds as long as they stay within the budget area around. Is that correct?
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're voting the total budget of either 54 million or 53 million, but if we need to buy more PPE and custodial and spend less in school supplies, we can do that. Is that the question?
Okay. Yeah, sort of like that. Okay.
Yep.
Because I was thinking then the 187, we were talking about perhaps not needing it next year. We don't know what that looks like. But having it in the budget gives us a little tiny bit of buffer, right, of things that we could be able to move around within the budget if we needed to, that are not one-time funds. Is that an appropriate thought, or am I oversimplifying the consideration?
So if the 187 were to stay in the budget, and we did not need to spend it all on PPE, then that 187 would be available for the committee to reallocate to another line item within the budget. That's correct.
Okay, that was my question. And then my comment in general is, I ran partially for social justice, but partially because of the growth concerns, right? And the concerns that I've been hearing from parents is that some of these things just seem to pop out of nowhere. Suddenly we're spending a lot of money. When I look at this budget, I see sort of the bare minimum we can be while accounting for that growth. I feel like if we pull back any further, what's going to happen is exactly what I was saying parents feel like happens, right? Is suddenly we have X amount more students and we have to go back to a special town meeting and we have to ask for extra money and we get asked, why didn't you account for that? We are trying to account for it here, and I would not be comfortable stripping back this budget and then having to later sort of shuffle back in and make parents concerned about why is this money suddenly needed, right? We did account for it, we did try to, we are planning for it here, and we have done it at the bare minimum we can possibly do it and still be accounting for some of that growth. So I guess that is my comment, is I am not comfortable with the idea of stripping down this budget any further, because I feel like if we do, we will be back in front of the town in a town meeting having to ask for money again. And it would look like we didn't consider issues that we are really considering and that are already included in this money.
Thank you, Leah. Joe?
Yeah, I have a question for Mrs. Rothermich, I guess just for to kind of enhance the public understanding and make sure we get it too. We have obviously a presidential inauguration tomorrow, and already the new administration has been talking about lots of money for education going to the states. And when I think about the fact that the budget as proposed represents, we would be, even with the 2.5% tax increase, it would leave us $2 million short. I wonder if you can help us understand how you think about that potential additional funding that's coming as a variable. And maybe it applies to PPE too. I know if we put PPE out of our budget in the town still has to spend that money. It's just not in the school budget. So from a taxpayer point of view, that part doesn't solve my question. But I am wondering about new sources of revenue, say from the federal government. Is there a chance that some of that could impact districts like Hopkinton during the fiscal year that we're talking about in this budget?
Yeah, there is that possibility. A lot of times what that money may come through as is additional, for instance, CARES money. So there may be additional grants for the FY 21-22 budget that would take care of things such as PPE. What we ran into this year was having to hire additional staff because of the hybrid and not being able to make the schedules work. So what would those grants or potential additional funding look like? There is that possibility. I do know that $2 million that was the original estimate for that 2.5 tax impact, that number will continue to change, and we will not hear a number from even the state until next week. I believe it's Wednesday before we would get that first iteration. So the revenue picture will continue to change right through town meeting.
Thank you.
Nancy?
So this is something I find challenging in any year, but I think this year even more so, is that we're looking to vote our budget and to pass it on before the revenue picture is really, I know it continues to change up until town meeting, but it feels like there are so many variables still. That's challenging. This year, I think what has been even more challenging is some of the enrollment growth issues that we're not sure where that's going to fall. And looking back at our public hearing from last week, I know that there were questions about social emotional and mental health of our students. And that's always, I think most of you know that's professionally what I do. And I have a lot of concern for how our students will return in the fall in a different way. We've had, seen nationally such drastic increases in mental health needs in kids, and schools often are the first line of defense. That said, we worked at this budget really hard. We listened to presentations, and I felt like we were appreciative of the asks, which seemed, while they're not small when you look at a dollar number, they seem modest for all that's being accomplished within the budget, particularly when you look at the per pupil expenditure that Hopkinton has been able to achieve. So I would support this budget, but I wouldn't support making any cuts to the services that are providing. The PPE, I could it's been in, it's been out. I want to make sure that if the PPE funding doesn't come through, that we wouldn't have to cut something else to pay for PPE. That's my one hesitation there. But otherwise, just want to support where we're at is kind of not going lower than what we have for the services we're providing.
Thanks, Nancy. Meg, did you have?
Yeah, just lastly, I wanted to thank Mrs. Rothermack and Dr. Kavanaugh for so carefully crafting this budget once again. I'm grateful for the transparency of the budget, the length at which you've discussed each aspect of it over the last 3 or so months. I feel like you've combed away any excess. I don't think there ever was any excess. I'm always surprised by how modest the requests are on the part of our principals and other district personnel. So I support it in full. I also don't think that we could decrease the amount that we're asking for. I'm a little troubled by this notion of maybe we need this money for PPE or not, but I prefer to include it. Do you really think all of this COVID stuff is going to disappear by September? I hope so.
I guess I'm happy to jump in on the PPE. What we have been told by our counterparts in the town is that in the event that we need additional money for PPE, it can come out of the town's coffers. But what they've also said is that they are kind of hanging their hat on the idea that there will be some federal money coming in that will help us pay for that PPE. So to take it out of this budget might make sense in terms of our percentage that we present to the town. And I know, Joe, you were asking that question, but I believe that what President-elect still until tomorrow, Biden is saying that we would have about $130 billion nationwide for elementary and secondary public education. So that's an awful lot of money. So maybe that will also be helpful to us as we move forward.
Right. I think it gets back to Nancy's comment that it's really tough to talk on the revenue side before we even have the state aid in, and now we have that additional uncertainty too.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
on the other side, we have gone through this multiple times now in pretty good detail. And again, I really like the transparency, the format where we talk high level, then go down to the budget item and then drill down even further into there and then back out. I think that was really helpful to understand how it all works. And I think it's always confusing sometimes when you see 5 or 7% increase, for example, on salaries, but it's not that everyone's getting 5 to 7% raise, right, Mrs. Rothmich? It's sometimes that it had to do with the enrollment growth is driving additional headcount expenses, and that's the number that's in there. I just wanted to make sure that someone clarified that.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say with regard to the headcount, the other thing that reason why I wouldn't want to decrease, except maybe for the PPE, the ask is because our faculty, our staff is working so hard, and what this budget is supporting is to allow them to do their jobs in the best way that they can. And I feel like taking away from that, it would be putting a large burden on a group of people who have been through an awful lot and jumped to amazing heights in the middle of a difficult time for us.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I think you have all covered it. My only personal hesitation about the budget is just the challenge that the fall will bring. Having students who have struggled among our ranks. We have students who've struggled mightily in the remote or the hybrid, or even those who come every day, and maybe they've fallen behind a little bit and they're going to need some help. And then we have students who have a different environment or access to different things who maybe vaulted ahead a grade in some subjects. And in September, we're one Hopkinton again, I hope. And we bring all of these students together, and we have to synthesize this disparate student body into a set of classrooms that make sense and function, and be able to address the individual needs of the students sitting in the chairs. And, you know, it's just going to be a different fall, and it's going to be challenging. And I do worry that, you know, we may need some more instructors, some more teachers to help where we need interventions or where we need enhancements, where we need that individualized work so that we can bring our community back into a set of classrooms that work. And I hope we have enough, but that's where my worry is. I certainly don't feel comfortable right now because the asks were very modest, asking for any additional cuts. So, you know, again, the PPE is always an interesting one. I mean, we know that our students won't be vaccinated at all because they're underage. So we know the students will be living in a world where we learn to live with COVID, where we all learn to live with COVID. And I don't know what that means for PPE, but I'm sure there'll be some PPE somewhere next year. I hope somebody can afford it, but I'm willing to, you know, I guess I would take the recommendation from Dr. Kavanaugh and Ms. Rothermick on the PPE component, but the rest of it, I feel like, you know, we can only vote what we know, and we know that this is what we need at a minimum. We can't really vote the revenue side because we don't know it and we don't control it. So tonight we're voting what we need. And like I said, I'll take a recommendation or a motion from anybody.
Could I ask a question on the PPE? I just want to make sure I get it. I mean, through December 31st, the district was reimbursed through the CARES Act for PPE, right? And the reason we have this amount in our budget is because that money expired. And we need to get PPE moving forward. So we're paying for it out of our budget. There's a hope that it'll be reimbursed by a new CARES Act or some kind of mechanism, right? Is that where we are?
Correct.
Well, there's that, and the town also has committed to creating a line item within the whole town budget. So there'll be two sources, if you will. So if there is not federal funding for additional PPE, there will be a line item for 200,000 in the townwide budget specifically for PPE.
Okay. I guess I'm kind of in favor of there being one kind of central town budget for it, but it's also based on my prediction that there will be federal reimbursement for it. I don't want us to deceive ourselves in front of town meeting that we're saving the town money by taking 187,000 out of the school budget because it's just being moved to a different item in the overall town budget.
That's
so
correct.
We're not doing anybody any favors, but if administratively the town thinks it's better to have kind of one single fund, that's fine. I don't want us to then re-spend that money on something else because it's money that we're spending that comes from the taxpayers already. After it gets reimbursed through CARES Act and we have a great surplus or something, then we can talk, but we don't know what that amount of reimbursement might or might not be at this point.
So my personal view based on the questions that I asked is that I would prefer to keep the PPE in our budget because if we don't spend it, great. If we do spend it on PPE, great, it's in the budget. But if we also end up in an emergency situation where we need to move money around and we didn't spend it on PPE, we now have this little bit of money in there that we have a little bit of say in moving around. And it may not be much, it may not do a lot, but depending on how much we get out of our one-time funds, it may be, the extra social emotional support person that we need that we didn't realize we needed. So I guess I prefer to have the caution of having that money available. And like I said, if we don't use it and we don't need it and we get a lot of federal support, then that money is going to go back into the town. We're not going to spend it just willy-nilly, right? But if we do end up in a bad situation and we don't need the PPE money, then it gives us a little bit of flexibility. So that's my take on it.
I hear what you're saying. I definitely do. And there are so many unknowns for the fall. We're so committed to transparency with how our funds are being earmarked that I think we are currently thinking this is a PPE placeholder. So I like the idea of keeping it as a PPE placeholder. And, to Joe's point, if the town really thinks that it's easier to manage centrally, I don't know. I feel I'm okay with that. I do get your point, though. I guess I'll throw it to the committee. Does someone want to make a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to pass the budget now.
As written or as written minus the PPE?
As written with the PPE.
With the PPE staying in the school budget, or with the PPE moving to a central town budget?
Staying in the school budget.
I second that.
Can I just make a discussion after the second there?
Yes,
through the
please
chair?
discuss.
So I also think realistically, this budget is going to come back to us for discussion. It's not likely to just kind of go forward in a smooth sailing way, just as budget talks continue even after we passed it. If it turns out that the town absolutely, definitely 100% has that PPE money, it can still be taken out at a later time. It's unlikely we'd be able to add it back in, however.
That's a good point. We will very likely be meeting next week. So,
and the week after, and the week after that.
So the current motion is to accept the budget, to approve the proposed fiscal year 22 budget as written. And it's seconded by Leah. And I will take a roll call vote. Leah.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Meg.
Aye.
Nancy.
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. And the budget passes. And the budget work actually continues. So we'll keep the discussion going. Next item is the HTA funds for town warrant, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, so I am recommending that tonight you vote to approve an article for the annual town meeting warrant, that we take $500,000 from our school stabilization fund, from our legacy farms host community agreement money, and move that into the school budget. And that we've chosen the dollar amount of $500,000 because our thinking is that if we do need to hire additional personnel for either instructional or social, emotional, or behavioral needs of our students in the fall, if you imagine that you'd be hiring folks at around $70,000 when people come into the district, that would give you the leeway of adding about 7 positions if you absolutely needed to do that with about $500,000. So that is the recommended amount.
Is there any discussion?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very hesitant about using a host community agreement from legacy farms to fund things that aren't anchored into the enrollment growth that's coming from legacy farms. This is the first year that we are working under host community agreement funds that are now capped. We had been under an agreement that was modified last year, but previous to that, for every group of 30 school-aged population in legacy farms, the developer contributed a specific amount for those students. to cover a portion of their education expenses. It was negotiated, as part of the overall development there over 10 years ago. But now that we have a cap, we know that we're not going to ever get more than $4 million moving forward. I'm hesitant to just kind of spend it so much in the first year and it not really being anchored to specific enrollment growth from legacy farms. Now, we also have the benefit of increased tax revenue from legacy farms. I don't want people to think that's the HCA is the only source of revenue. Legacy farms contributes millions in tax revenue to the town. But the idea of just kind of unanchoring this HCA money from that development concerns me. And the fact that we would take so much from a one-time funding source and put it into a budget that could be recurring every year, it could put the town in a difficult situation years ahead where we run out of that one-time fund because it's capped, and yet that expense continues well into the future. So that's my concern. I don't know if others have thoughts on that too, but I know at a prior meeting, a few of us expressed a desire to be very judicious in how we spend that money and when.
Thank you. Comments?
So I just want to kind of bounce back to that. My understanding of this article is that it's just to move the money so that we would be able to, at a later meeting, if we deem that there is a need that meets what we determine to be appropriate, that we could then allocate it. It doesn't allocate the money to actually be used. If we move the money and we don't spend it, we don't lose it. It still remains, even though like our operating budget goes away at the end of the year, the HCA money will not. And that we still have to vote for the actual any actual use of the funds down the road.
It sounds technically accurate what you're saying, Nancy, but if you listen to what the administration argument was for doing this vote, they have specific uses of it in mind right now. So that's something to consider. I'm not convinced that the uses being proposed for it map to what we would consider judicious use of those funds.
Ultimately, though, we would have to approve the use. Regardless, it's like the money that we had moved, was it 2 years ago that we moved the money that we then wound up using for the addition on the high school or for the engineering study on the high school?
Maybe Dr. Kavanaugh, clarify again. Can you explain again? You're thinking we definitely need this money this fall. Is that right?
So if it does become an article on the town meeting warrant, as Nancy Kavanaugh just said, what that will do is it will make it available to us. If we don't do this and we run into a situation where we need money, we would not have access to the legacy farms money. One thing that's very important, I think, for us to remember is that when we were writing, and this goes back a few years, the actual language for the articles for town meeting, our legal counsel suggested that we include the language that says that this is due to growth in whole or in part related to legacy farms. So as we're using money, it doesn't just have to be because we have increased enrollment from legacy farms, but it could be that we have increased enrollment district-wide because we have the in whole or in part language. I am thinking that, and I know I've made this part of the budget presentation several times now, that we are expecting 74 new kids. What happens if we have 174 new kids? And then we need several new teachers, whether that's a second grade teacher or a chemistry teacher or someone to help us out with social emotional support or an art teacher. We would not have access to that money if we didn't move this money now through a town meeting article on the warrant. But if we do move it, there's nothing that says that it has to be spent, and it would still be spent under your purview.
So, okay, that helps. I guess the in whole or in part helps me too. I didn't realize that. And I guess if we want to argue that, then we could say too that even if we were to have to use a one-time source this year, we'd have to vote it, as Nancy said, first of all, later. But then it could then, if we see it as a continuing expense in future years, we don't have to keep dipping back into the HCA year after year for that. If it looks like it's going to become a recurring expense, I prefer we build it into our budget request in future years.
Yes.
So what Joe said now gives me a little pause, not in terms of the 500, well, not in terms of the warrant, but once again, in terms of the growth in the budget, right? So if we do this and we bring $500,000 out of one-time funds and we spend it, let's say we spend it, hopefully we don't, on 7 new teachers. That means that at the end of next year, when we make our budget request, that percentage is going to look really big, right? Because we just spent these one-time funds this coming year, and now we have to keep paying those professionals. And so the leap between budget to budget is going to look really, really big. And that concerns me a little bit, because then we might get a lot of pushback on that. So I just voted for the budget. Now I wish I'd voted for a budget with more money in it, so that you wouldn't see the big jump the coming year, right? If we do have to use these one-time expenses.
Right, Leah, I think I get it. I mean, you made a point that the budget kind of does a great job meeting what we know to be the expenses and nothing more. But you know, I think what we're talking about now is an unknown possible bigger expense later that we can't possibly predict now and wouldn't want to budget for because it's unknown, right? So but you're right, sure. If we turn a one-time expense funding into a permanent budget need in future years, it would look like a big increase, but then we'd have to explain that.
And this is a lot why I want more information before we talk about trying to balance the operational budget with this very same fund, because that is definitely not the purpose of the fund. But my feeling about this this ask is that if we look at our budget that Ms. Rothermick just went through the details of the head count and so forth, we can look at a number of those items, and they are enrollment related, and they are related to changing needs from new people who've moved in with a different set of educational requirements, whether it's additional ESOL headcount or just additional teachers, period. So a little bit is, you could say we're addressing that as it comes up. When I look at the fall of 2021 in the fiscal 22 year, I'm concerned about things that we can't predict. And I know from discussions with the town that we can't really ask for a whole lot more. I mean, it's a difficult time, and as well as some people are managing the pandemic, some people are not managing that well. And there are a lot of things to balance. So given this particular year with so many unknowns, the only thing that gives me comfort with the budget we voted is the idea that if we have 2 classes worth of redshirted kindergartners that we don't know about, or a bunch of kids who went off to private school because they were able to access full-time in-person learning, but you know what, they really love Hopkinton, they're back next year. Like if there's that sort of a thing that we can't predict, I want to be able to weather it, and I don't know how else to do it. And I think it's reasonable. I don't know that I'm hoping we don't have to touch this money, but I'm nervous about finding ourselves in the fall with who knows what to deal with and no way to access money without holding another town meeting, a special town meeting, to then get an allocation. This will just move it to a fund that we can then tap, and we will have to vote on every expenditure of this money.
I totally agree with the Warren article. Like I said, it was just as Joe was talking, I realized that with the pushback we get on the budget, if we do have to spend this money, we are going to have to push back harder next year on cutting the budget if it's going to include expenses that we did out of the one-time funds ongoing, right? Because we can't afford to have cut to something we had to do because of enrollment numbers. So it was just kind of a thought ahead, this is something we have to kind of brace ourselves to have to do if we end up using this money. So
And
was
maybe
all.
some historical information will be helpful here. So I just pulled up some numbers from our FY20 budget ask. And if we go back to positions that we added in FY19, we added almost $750,000 worth of positions because the enrollment growth was so rapid at that time that when we got to the FY20 budget where we had additional asks, we had already added in 750,000. So it's kind of interesting that we're not asking for something so dissimilar here. So I guess what I'm saying is history here might repeat itself. And you're right.
Okay.
It does make your asks so much bigger that it's really hard, I think, for the community to understand why you're asking for so much.
Yeah, I'm fine kind of moving it in for now. When it comes time though, in the fall, Dr. Kavanaugh, if we need to vote on actually using it, we're going to need much more data driven on the exact enrollment that's driving it, the exact enrollment per teacher and things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
If there's no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion on to approve an article for the annual town meeting warrant in the amount of $500,000 from the host community agreement to be used at the school committee's discretion for unanticipated growth-related costs arising during the fiscal year 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Nancy. Leah, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well, and that passes. I want to take a time check because I know we spent some time on the budget. I think it's important time to spend. I'm going to make a suggestion, Dr. Kavanaugh, that we hold your formative evaluation focus indicators to the first meeting in February, the February 4th meeting, if that's okay with you. I think it's a little bit late, but I think it's a lot to get through tonight.
I agree. It's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you. So the only other new item we have to get through a first reading of is the McKinney-Vento homeless education policy. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. So we took up this policy recently, and we did because Dr. Zaleski had received word from the state that they would be coming in to do, again, what's called tiered focus monitoring. It used to be called coordinated program review. And when she was going through some of the criteria that they would be looking for, and one of the criteria was an updated McKinney-Vento policy. We've always had this policy, but I don't believe ours had been updated since 2010. And so with the Every Student Succeeds Act, which I think what came about in about 2015, our policy seemed a little bit dated. And so there were some things that she knew we would be in trouble with DESE if we didn't update it soon. So what the policy working group did was we took a look at all of Dr. Zaleski's recommendations for revisions to our 2010 policy. We went to the MASC website and pulled theirs, and then we did alter some of the language in places where we felt sort of things might need a little more support of homeless children or different language. And then we made sure that all of Dr. Zaleski's recommendations did in fact land in that policy. So there's no real rush on this right now, but we did want to bring it to you for a first reading tonight.
Thank you to the policy working group for working diligently on all of these policies. Did anyone receive any comments on this? I did not see any.
I didn't see any either.
Okay. It's a first reading and it's, getting late. So I'm going to suggest if we don't have any questions right now, we'll digest this and bring it back for a second reading at our next meeting.
That's fine.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you for bringing this forward. I noticed the changes I'm assuming there were enough changes that it would have been too hard to read if they had been highlighted.
That's correct. What we decided to do is just give you both, I think. So I think that you have the 2010 version, and you also have the new draft. I think when we made that wholesale change to adopt MASCs, it got far too dicey to redline.
Great. So we'll give this another look ourselves. We'll get the community to take a look at it. If you're listening still, please take a look at this policy and give us any feedback via email so that we can consider it at our next deliberation. With that, I'm going to move to old business, future agenda items. We now have item F on new business from this week. And is there anything else? Okay. Well, of course, everyone knows you can always email me or Dr. Kavanaugh with any ideas that pop up. Items by consensus, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. As superintendent, I recommend that the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agendas.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Nancy. Motion by Nancy, second by Meg, and a roll call vote. I'll start with Nancy.
Yes.
Meg?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. And that brings us to adjournment.
Oh, do you need a motion?
Yes, please.
Then I will make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. Vote Leah?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. And we are adjourned at 9:04 p.m. I want to thank you all for the very difficult and hard and arduous work on the budget. I know it's going to continue, but really, I really appreciate the detailed attention that you're giving it.
Thank you.
And we're
Thank you.
off. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, HCAM.